Alright, this is Katari and Lightning, and welcome back. I would now like to take a look at the people who have been defending Tenet. So, I have some very select people here. We're going to go start off with the videos this time around, and after that, I'm going to get into some of the articles, okay? And then some of the Twitter posts from people who have been defending Tenet. So, to start right off, we're going to start with Barnes and Fry. So Fry is the guy here on the left, Barnes is the guy on the right. All right, we're just going to go and open up this video. Okay, so that's where this is Fry over here. This is Barnes over here. Okay, so these two guys, they're going to be talking about Lauren Chen specifically. And as you can see, it starts about 30 minutes into this particular discussion. All right. So basically, they're going to be defending Lauren Chen and talking about the definition of a for, like what counts as being like a, what is required for being a registered foreign agent, these sorts of things, right? So, but these guys are both members of LawTube. Now, recently, I'll tell you about just so I can get you kind of like a character analysis of these two. So recently, they were involved in this controversy with this guy by the name of Nick Rakita. Now, what did Nick Rakita do? Well, Nick Rakita was the biggest guy as far as the law tubers go. So, like, they're like these conservative bunch of lawyers who are, again, new right guys, right? Largely the U.S. I believe Fry here is from, Fry is from Canada, I believe, but lives in the U.S., I think. So, anyways, Nick Rakita got arrested because he was engaged in literally literally mass drugs, right? Like he was using cocaine in that. They found like cocaine in the traces, the hairs of his kids. Like literally, this is crazy stuff. Like there were drugs that were being left out in places where there were also like literally loaded firearms out about, right? Like literally just crazy stuff. So basically, now what do you think these guys in this again conservative law community, and then also in this other group called like the Fandom Menace that they were doing like pop culture analysis and that sort of thing. So, what do you think these guys did in response to Nick Rakita, one of their own, being arrested for drug abuse? Well, the answer is that they might have defended him. Okay, like they immediately defend him, are like, oh, this is the state going and suppressing him. But it's like again, it was like the county, literally the county that was tipped off by someone from Nick Rakia's church is like, the person from Nick Rakia's church is like, the kids are like really disheveled, and yeah, so maybe you should do like a wellness check of that. And so basically, what ended up happening is that the kids were like not being cared for. Nick Rakita and his wife, and also his basically live-in mistress, right? Like they were all using drugs, okay? Um, and yet then it turns out that Nick Rakita, like he's been involved in like swinger culture. He's been involved in drugs once more. They've been neglecting their kids, and this is all while posing as being this traditional Christian family, like good little Christians that go to church and all that sort of thing, right? So but the point is that all these guys in LawTube, like, they wanted to immediately circle the horses around Nick Rakita, and they were like, oh, we're going to go and defend him. Like, literally, they did that. Despite the fact they get guilty, definitely. Like, just, you look at the guy, he's on drugs, right? Like, just 100% guilty. There's, like, court cases coming up. And so it really does speak, though, to the volumes, right? Again, we talked about this sort of tribalistic mindset where it's like these guys, they pose as having, a morality, a more, these deep conservative sentiments and that sort of thing. And then what happens when they get, one of their own gets pointed out for being, corrupt at that? Well, they go and circle around and go and try and defend the guy, right? Like, literally, even though he's guilty, they just try and go defend the guy with like their ridiculous excuses and that. This video though is not about Nick Rakita, but I think that is illustrative of what these people are like. Okay, this video is about them defending Lauren Chen, who is someone who is, if anything, probably less morally defensible than Nick Rakita, simply for the fact that Nick Rakita's drug habits happen to go and have the effect of damaging a few people nearby him, whereas Lauren Chen's influencer operation has been reaching, millions of people, right? Like millions of people with the messages of Russia. So now, what they're going to be arguing in this video is that, oh, actually, a foreign agent is only if you are literally employed by a foreign government to go and spread propaganda. So they're trying to go and weave and duck and say, oh, like Laura Chen is, yeah, she took, money from this Russian businessman who, definitely has Kremlin associations, but it's like, well, actually, she herself is not a foreign agent. She is not guilty of this. It gets, like, ridiculous, right? But we'll go and see that ridiculousness as we go along here in this video. All right.
Conspiring with the Five Eyes network, that's the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, were conspiring with the CIA.
So right, immediately off into the intelligence agencies. This, by the way, is a typical tactic of the new right. Remember, it's like Russia and China to a great extent. They're like surveillance states where the spy agencies, they have all this domestic power, right? Like in the Western world, the spy agencies do not have domestic power. Like the CIA, for example, does not have domestic power in the U.S. Like that is the FBI. The CIA is like, they do like intelligence analysis of foreign areas. There are like some spies and that sort of thing, but it gets like, and, there are a bunch of different rival, intelligence agencies that do various different things. Like there's, military intelligence and all these sorts of groups, right? So point being is that it's not like some sort of unified body. And, but anyway, it's like, what's worse is just the Russian, talking points there apply their mentality to the world. It's like, in our society, right? Like in Russia, the FSB, well, they have God and, literally said, we're going to be the ones who are dictating like what university professors at the universities could go teach, right? This is how deeply, we're going to be dictating the public school curriculum. So this is how deeply they control Russian society, right? And so then they apply that and go say, well, ergo, American society is this controlled by the CIA, right? It's ridiculous. And then, so then they imagine this mighty intelligence apparatus that apparently the CIA is, that somehow has about 50 times the influence of the actual CIA, right? So just pretty ridiculous stuff overall, but there you go.
To spy on the Trump campaign and to launder their illicit spying operations by having another country do it if they couldn't do it domestically. That was part of the Five Eyes operation, but they needed
a Five Eyes is referring, by the way, to it's like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, UK, United States, like that's sort of what they're referring to there.
Pretext.
Specifically the intelligence agencies.
In the United States, that pretext was the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which was intended to limit this kind of illicit spying. It arose from the Church Committee in the late 1970s as a way when they figured out that the CIA...
Yeah, it's like just, silly stuff, right? Silly stuff.
And the NSA and others were illegally spying on people all the time. They said, okay, no more of this. If you're going to be doing it as a foreign intelligence gathering, you've got to abide by certain limitations. You've got to go to a foreign intelligence surveillance court. Of course, it didn't take long for those legislative mechanisms and courts to become co-opted by the very intelligence community they're supposed to supervise.
A reminder, there's no evidence that happened, right? No evidence that happened. And remember, you're in a position of, again, like a new Cold War situation, right? Where it's like your enemies are running literal intelligence campaigns inside of your country, right? And including like the talking points that these guys are using, right? Like there's indications, right, that these sorts of people, we don't know if it's just the talking points that have come down from, this collaboration between the new right and then foreign adversaries, right? Or if it's simply the fact that they themselves are corrupt. Like, it could be either of these things depending upon how extreme you want to see each of these different characters as. But again, nothing really surprises me too much. Like, reminder, like just this is how things work. This is how it works in your new Cold War sort of situation.
Yeah. Robert Kennedy recently told Tucker Carlson the reason
Yeah, RFK and Tucker Carlson again, like just right into it, right?
The reason why he could never get appointed to head of the CIA is because the Intelligence Committee that in the Senate is run by the intelligence community.
Yeah, and there's no evidence of that. Like it's, I think it should be absurd to say that the intelligence community in the Senate is run by senators, not literally like the intelligence agencies. Like that's ridiculous. And they're senators that are appointed by their specific parties, right? It's like
What used to be a select committee on intelligence, the Church Committee, meant to govern and control and cabin and constrict the intelligence community, has become a tool of the intelligence community. Just look at the kind of people that are on those boards.
why you go and get into that? No, you won't be. Of course, they're just going to be senators, right? It's like, and what's the point? Like, people who have interest in intelligence are on the intelligence board. Is that what he's going for? It's like, okay, like, would that be the case? Or it's like, people of interest in the military are on the military board. It's like, oh, shocker, right?
Sign if you want to track somebody's investments. Once they're on the intelligence committee, by golly, they tend to start to make a lot of money up on Wall Street.
So that's a corruption assertion, right? Once more, like that's something you'd have to go and prove. But it's interesting too, like interesting that a lawyer here is going out with all of these different statements that are pretty clear. Could be interpreted as libelous and that sort of thing.
However, that correspondence tends to work. Not as good as Nancy Pelosi. She still got everybody beat for her magical ability to get those stocks to just go up and up and up that are in her portfolio.
Again, corruption assertion, right? Nancy Pelosi, very high-ranking member of the Democrats, right? Once more, corruption assertion.
But that's the nature of it. So the first part of any kind of Russiagate scheme, the template is come up with a bogus pretext.
Yeah, so they're going back to Russiagate, which is, again, the entire point is that, to what extent did Russia have influencers in the U.S. election, and to what extent did that sway the 2016 election in Trump's favor, right? People have been debating about that, right? Like, we know that there were, again, like, you cannot say that Jill Stein, for example, is not a Russian operative, right? Like, she is obviously that, and there are a whole bunch of other people in there that were clearly associated with that group, and then, just like nowadays, it's just simply become more blatant because these people are simply more prominent on the internet, right, and prominent in politics, right? So you have people who, like 15 years ago, you would have laughed at seeing, being like, oh, the former president would associate himself with someone like Laura Loomer, right? Like, you would have laughed and said that's ridiculous, and yet here she is nowadays, right, with traveling with Trump and that, right? So just like all this stuff that's gone down. So again, it's like the internet coming to the real world, and that's like the internet is not really. Of course, the internet brings all of its own problems, right?
To illicitly spy on people. One giveaway that this indictment was really all about illicitly spying on people is their evidentiary sources.
If they have Discord chat, how the hell they got in there, nobody knows.
So Discord will turn over. Discord is, again, owned by Microsoft, which means that if the agencies wish to go and get, information from, they can do this via a warrant. They don't need to do this via, like, a hacking operation, whatever these guys are going to come up with. They just need a warrant. They can go and get access to the server, its files. These things are all recorded by Discord, right? They've been for years. Even if you go and delete stuff off of Discord, it's still going to be on there, right? They're still going to have that on their servers. So the point being is that, they're going to go and have access to that when they think that there is a potential for spying going on, right?
DMs. And I was wondering, like, people were saying, well, Lauren must have turned and she was one of their witnesses. She turned witness to the two Russian agents. From what I understand, she was as shocked when they got raided and shut down and saw the indictment as anybody else. So that's unlikely. So how the hell did they get in there? Probably another FISA application behind closed doors based on falsified evidence like they didn't.
Again, it's not falsified. Once more, we determined that they were literally agents that they were being in contact with. And by the way, it's very dumb to do this over Discord, I should say. Like, I know there's like Signal and like just remember like the typical what these people have done over is like Telegram, which is of course uh, not something too that's going to be there for them in the future. Now that of course the French have taken action against Telegram, right? So Discord is not a this like again, Discord is owned by a mainstream company that will respond to any sort of legal warrants, and it will give over data if there is a legal warrant. And so that's what has happened here.
2016.
Completely. So that's always the first goal. You allege foreigners are involved. That allows you to circumvent normal federal district courts that would have to be involved in any kind of search warrant. It allows you to spy on everybody's communications and correspondence.
And once more, remember, like these guys are just they're outraged that one of the people in their group has gotten exposed for being again, traitor, for being corrupt. Like they're outraged by this because again, they don't have any sense of morality except for the fact that they have this tribal affiliation, right? Like Freiheit Barnes, again, no sense of actual direct morality, and you saw that once more, as I pointed out, by them defending like guys like Nick Rekieta, right? Just no sense. And by the way, these guys are just going to lie a lot throughout this, just so you know.
Without them having any notice or knowledge of it. The entire indictment is filled with your classic FISA material. Almost nothing that would come from a traditional material. So that.
And by the way, you notice that all this is completely irrelevant because they were literally exposed. Like she's literally been exposed to taking money from the Russians, right? Like literally, none of your little excuses of dancing and claiming, oh, free speech is going to make a single bit of difference. That is exactly what happened.
That's what the first rule of, and remember what FISA allows. FISA allows a what they call one hop rule. Basically, anybody that you have a FISA warrant on, you can also look at who they're communicating.
Oh, so now they have a legal warrant, and like you're still going to be bitching at them about it. Like seriously, if like here's the thing too, right? Like if security agencies had to go and get like a literal written warrant, right, from a judge every single time they were going to go and do something like a look around in the online sphere, like that would be so often, right? And the other thing is that it's not even necessary, right? Because it's like these major servers like Discord, like they handle international traffic. Like you don't, like again, it's like you don't need the same sort of traditional, like it's traditional warrants are simply too slow, too time consuming, and it's like you need to sometimes be able to, what, for example, if you need to go and access like 30 different discords or whatever, and you're constantly adding like different places where you need to go and get access to like logged files. Like again, this is the sort of thing that's just, it's really time consuming if you have to continuously go through a legal warrant, like just tons of stuff. And so this is just why these sorts of FISA warrants, right? Like we're like, I should say traditionalist warrant and then FISA warrant, right? Like that's sort of the difference, right?
To their separate communications. So what this was they could look at, and you look at it, they chose people that were influencers in the conservative space.
Yes, because that is one of the spaces that has massive amounts of foreign influence into it, which is why your conservatives have now, again, in this sort of new right paradigm, right? They've turned to, people who constantly promote propaganda against their countries. It's like, well, they hate allies. They hate people who are, courageously defending themselves. It's like, well, why do these conservative types do all this? And that's, a good question. As I point out, they seem to have oddly amplified that a lot in the last 2.5 years, like just adapted this mentality to its absolute extreme in 2.5 years. And what exactly changed, right?
So they wanted to spy on Dave Rubin and anybody communicating with Dave Rubin. They wanted to spy on people communicating with Tim Pool and anybody they were communicating with. Spy on Benny Johnson and anybody they're communicating with. Spy on Lauren Chen and any.
Yeah, because they're suspects in an investigation. Again, it's like, literally, this is what you do. Like, you put a surveillance tap on people. And, yeah, this is, again, I should also point out, like, once more, this is the, these are all very moronic people involved with Tenet, which is why they've been caught in this way, right? They didn't keep any sort of degree of separation between themselves and where their money is coming from, who they're talking with, right? So it's like they're very dumb, but there are others who are going to be more subtle about it.
When they're communicating with, and spy on Lauren Southern and anyone she's communicating with. That was the goal and objective. By the way, that's a giveaway as to who is really behind this, and I'll get to that in a little bit.
No, it isn't. It's just that there's it's a way that the security services wanted to go and say, well, who exactly is going and continuously putting out propaganda, right? Like, literally what they should be doing all this time, like during this period where you have like massive amounts of foreign, influencers coming in, right? Like, you literally have to go and be doing this because this is sort of, you're not in a peace mindset anymore. You have to go to a war mindset. It's these foreign powers have undermined domestic peace. They've undermined the confidence that citizens can have in one another, like the legitimacy of, the media, of the people that they're seeing, of what they're seeing online, right? Like, all these things have been undermined to the point where, like, your average person doesn't even understand quite the extent to which these things have been destroyed. And again, been destroyed by people like you see in front of you, right?
Now I'm just immediately regretting all of the pictures I've been sending Tim Pool. I'm joking, people.
He had like this really weird fetishistic picture they sent, like I don't know, it was like Fry here did something kind of weird like that. I forget the exact context, but I know that's something they did.
That was because I talked about it with Alex Jones on Friday.
Yeah, so he's associating with Alex Jones, right? There you go.
They had tried the same thing with Alex Jones. They kept trying to approach Alex Jones with foreign investors over the last 6 years in order so they could illicitly open up a FISA operation on Alex Jones.
Yeah, so it's a entrapment that he's claiming here, of course. Like, just the Nazi security agencies have been posing as foreign investors, etc., so they could go to trap us, dear little conservatives. Oh, look, we persecuted Pew, right? Like, this is just what he's going with.
Everybody connected to him. Jones, of course, sniffed it out every single time.
Did he? I mean, like, Jones is like, I've seen that tour that Jones took in the past couple of years, and remember, he's on the hook for all that money. So yeah, I think Jones definitely has some. It would have some interesting backers, right?
And in fact, frequently would report it to the feds. And he's like, of course, you guys are probably not going to investigate because you guys are probably behind this, but just FYI. So they finally quit after the third try of trying to entrap and ensnare Jones, and he didn't take the bait.
Also note that that's just taking Jones' word for it, which you should not do. Jones is not reliable in any way.
I see people in the chat a little confused, and it's understandable. Lauren Chen is the founder one, and her husband is founder two in the indictment. She founded the Tennessee company Tenet Media. Lauren Southern is one of the conservative commentators. Don't know if she's specifically named as a alien, whatever they call them, a commentator one in the indictment.
As far as I know, the guys who were named in it, or at least alluded to in it, were Benny Johnson and Tim Pool. That's as far as I know. The others, of course, there's a few others that are very blatant as far as the propaganda that they spread, but whether that's just the extent to which they were the ones that are looked at is debatable. I don't think Lauren Southern was one of the ones that was focused on, though. No. Lauren Southern and Dave Rubin weren't, as far as I know, focused on, I should say.
So it's Lauren Chen is the founder of Tenet, and Lauren Southern.
She was one of the Tenet people that Tenet was promoting. Mm-hmm. So the first goal, this was a spy operation, and it was to come up with a pretext to spy on all these people. The second,
no, it's not. It's that the Russians sent literal money over to these different influencers to have them spread their talking points. Remember, this guy, he wants you to go and believe that, this was the Russian guys that were sending that money over, right? He wants his audience to believe that they're fake and that they're actually CIA posing as the Russian guys, right? Like, that's literally what he wants you to believe. and they want you to believe that, oh, this happened just so that the feds could justify persecuting the conservative movement. Nothing said about all of the different forms of Russian propaganda that have been spread, which I have shown definitively that this is what this group was doing. Like, absolutely definitively. Like, there's no question about this.
Goal was a political operation, a sort of October surprise that could boost the Democratic ticket. So,
and there you go. It's like, this is just being done to, tear down Donald Trump. Like, literally, there you go. Like, just, this is the assertion, right?
That, when the time was right, when they'd milked all the information they could milk out of it, they would drop an indictment that would impugn the integrity of conservative media.
I mean, you've already impugned yourself enough. And you're also not conservatives. You're new right, which is to say you're a bunch of people like clothing yourself in language of things, clothing yourself in what are the supposed ideas of things, but you're not that yourself. You're just more deconstructionists out to destroy society.
And that would boost the Democratic narrative because they still think modern day McCarthyism works.
There you go. And once more again, like I said, bringing this left-wing terminology into the new right? McCarthyism, again, that was applied against communists, right? Communists in the Cold War period, and now, again, new Cold War period, right? Same sort of thing, right? Concerns about the Russian propaganda being spread in, Hollywood potentially, right? Like, that was one of it concern there, right? And that becomes the concern about Russian propaganda being spread by the new right media influencers, right? It is different as far as, like, the only thing that switched is the language that is, being used to clothe itself in, right? Like communism, new rightism. But the thing you have to understand is that these things are united in terms of the effect that they have on society. So,
I mean, it's extraordinary they believe this, but they've convinced themselves of this.
And again, like, these guys are all on board with using this sort of terminology, right? Like, McCarthyism probably laughed there, right? So it's like,
so they think that it will work to discredit conservative media and to boost the Democratic messaging. The third goal is, to your first question, to extend and expand the scope of the Foreign Agents Registration Act and comparable laws to effectively criminalize dissident speech in the United States.
And there you go. It's like, so apparently this guy's now saying, oh, it should be actually fine to go and take, millions of dollars from literally foreign influencers who are wanting you to go and spread messages that are literally to the detriment of your nation, like literally undermine your country, right? Like, this is what they want. Again, once more, like, again, these guys pose as conservatives. Like, does anything that they say actually sound like historically conservative to you? Like, it shouldn't, I'd hope, but anyways.
Mm-hmm. Simply because it is connected to, even in the most tangential, indirect, and unintentional way.
Is that what you call taking millions of dollars to amplify a message? Like,
funding from someplace outside the United States.
By what? An agent of one of your literal enemy countries. Like, literally.
Now, of course, this makes literally no sense.
It makes every bit of sense in the world. It's just, like, but I remind you, these guys are allegedly super turbo lawyers, right? Where they're both, like, allegedly legal experts, which is the entire deal with their show here. That they're supposedly really smart lawyers that, intelligent, new right people go and listen to. It's like, ugh. They're just proven by way to be, like, not, I should mention, like, neither of these guys are actually good lawyers, okay? Like, neither of them are, but anyways.
The idea, the Foreign Agents Registration Act was passed intended to limit Nazi lobbying of Congress, and which actually was a problem. But it was direct lobbying of the federal government, and that if you were going to directly lobby on behalf of a foreign government directly pays you to go talk to that government and do work that's the equivalent of diplomatic work, but you weren't being disclosed as a diplomat. Congress wanted you to.
See, again, things have changed, right? Like, things have changed in the world ever since, like, back in those days, right? Like, your media sources were in the newspapers and that. I'm not even sure that this guy is actually going to be correct on this point, right? It's like, like because, there are people that. See, the issue is that like all throughout the Cold War period, right? Like this was a constant issue that the West had to deal with, where it's like the West has free speech, right? But what that means is that in the Eastern countries they can just go and arrest anyone who is spreading a vaguely, pro-Western message. Whereas in the Western countries, like you have all these groups that can go into your, media, universities, school system, etc. They can go and say, oh, we're going to go spread, communist talking points here, and then we're going to go and amplify this via whatever social groups we want, right? And it's like you're having a difficulty of how to exactly deal with that speech, right? Like how do you go and look at people who are literally foreign agents? And by the way, this was not the only use of the foreign agents bill, right? Like there were other uses of it, but the point is that like so nowadays you have, again, people who are literally trying to undermine countries from the inside, and they're using all the tools that have been supplied with the concept that, there is this freedom of speech, right? And they are using them to go and undermine those countries for the benefit of authoritarian countries, which, again, the authoritarian countries don't want any sort of freedom of speech, right? They want centralized media, centralized everything, where it's like only amplify the voices of a few, basically. And so this isn't about dissidents, right? Like this is it might be, depending on your term that you want to call dissidents, but again, it's like not a sort of actual well, actually, let's go and look at it this way. Like dissidents, right, would be the sort of person who is going to completely undermine a society. That's a difference from a person who is a critic of their society, right? Where it's like the critic just goes and wants to go and critique different policies, but ultimately with the goal of making that society stronger. The dissident wants to go and destroy that society, right? That's kind of the difference between the two. So like the critic, dissident, right? And so I am going to say that like the entire point of these guys, right, is to be this sort of dissident, right? They might imagine themselves as being critics, but when they're defending this sort of thing, they're again acting in support of the whole idea that we want to go and destroy society, right? We want to go and be infiltrated by foreign propaganda. We don't want there to be any sort of restrictions on that, and want to go and have foreign money flow in so that they can go and sponsor us, right? Like this is what you're looking at here.
Disclose, oh, by the way, I've been paid now by the French, I've been paid now by the Germans, I've been paid now by the Russians, whomever. But that's what it was for, very limited, discrete context. It had only been used prior to General Flynn 6 times in American history.
Just to clarify,
a reminder: General Flynn was with the Russians, right? Like that's like we sitting them at the table with Putin and Jill Stein, right? Like we know who these people are. We know what they're supporting. Like just and what's where like again, it's like he wants to go. Guys like Mike Flynn, they want to have this whole Christian, theocratic, authoritarian, white society, right? Like this is what they go and support, right? Like there's, again, that's what they clothe their authoritarian desires in, all these different points and all these different forms, right?
That it's for lobbying the government, and people want to know if you're lobbying the government for foreign interests. That's where it makes sense.
And foreign governments, on behalf of foreign government, not just any foreign interest.
Again, what's for like the other thing is, like you can't go and separate out the interests of the oligarchs. Like think about what this guy's trying to do. He's like, oh yeah, this oligarch just randomly comes up with $10 million and funnels it into the U.S. and then wants these guys to go and promote Russian propaganda, right? Like literally, that's what you're looking at, right? Like that's not what happens. Like it's literally the Russian state goes and transfers money over to these different oligarchs, right? That the oligarchs go and transfer money over to the different parts of society that they want to go and use it to undermine. And reminder, they've done this in plenty of different governments, and it's resulted in the overthrow of those governments before. All right, like so. Again, it's like you can't go and make this separation between the private person and the government. Like this isn't how it works. It's just like saying, a Chinese corporation should just be, held as the Chinese corporation, not as a part of the government itself, right? Like this isn't how it works. Like you have to go and regard these things that are jointly linked together as being actually linked together. But of course, again, they just want to go and justify their whole persecution complex.
You have to be working directly for a foreign government.
The question will be whether or not, let's assume that, and let's assume they were lobbying the government, and let's assume that it's the two RT employees. The question would be, were they acting in their capacity as...
And by the way, reminder, this entire deal is that RT employees, RT as Russia Today, has become the Biden government has said this is an avenue by which the Russians have gone, and the Russian government has gone directly influenced the politics of the world, right? They've gone in. This is not a separate media organization. This is a tool of the Russian government, and it's been used to go and, again, spread the propaganda of the Russian government all throughout the world, right? And this is something that is absolutely true. Like, you cannot go and regard these as being just separate little news sources, right? And what's more, RT has been one that, it's been like over a decade, right? Like the conservative types, like these new right types, I should say, right? Like they've been using that site for their own propaganda for, like I said, a decade, right?
RT employees, even if they were RT being state media, would that count as government lobbying? But the bottom line, it's for lobbying the government, not for, I don't know, activism in the media. This.
Again, you can't go and make these sorts of distinctions nowadays. This isn't how it works. This isn't how it works. And if you want like legally expanded language, get legally expanded language. But this isn't how it can work, right? Like, you can't. Like these organizations, they start riots in the streets, right? They start movements that are seeking to go and degrade the belief of people in their governing structures in their countries. Like, again, these aren't things that can be allowed to stand. It's obvious what's happening here. It's obvious what foreign governments are doing with this. And it doesn't matter if they're just about directly lobbying the U.S. government, but it's like corrupting the people is an even more important element of this. And frankly, they've already, like, just look at the people in the U.S. government who go and repeat a lot of this propaganda. So it's like, it's already gone influenced them, right?
The idea that it now applies to any form of speech, that they keep trying to expand far wider and wider and wider. And I've been a critic of it from day one. Like the sedition laws, those are horrendous laws.
No, they aren't. There's a very good reason why sedition laws exist. Sedition is a very important concept, and like literally trying to undermine the government, the state, again, like sedition is, there's a reason why these things exist. And it's a good point. Like, look at how much he is trying to go and defend these things, right? Like, look how much Barnes is trying to go and defend these things. Like, why is he going and putting out like this, right? I think you know why already.
The variations that people get excited about our treason laws, a lot of the variations of our treason laws.
Yeah, immediately say JPAC, yeah.
Laws are unreliable laws that they used to go after political dissidents and outsiders. And that's especially true with the FARA laws. Ever since Flynn, they've been wanting to extend and expand this.
Yeah, because again, Flynn was a high-ranking member of the intelligence community that also was shown to have links to Russia. And that's a very concerning thing, right? Like, concerning in terms of, like, what are your national state secrets and that? And also, it's like these types can go and use their rank, like, they pull rank to go and get themselves a sort of, you can go get praised for being, a general or whatever, and then you can go and use that as a way to go and draw influence to yourself to the points that you're making, right?
To allow them to criminalize speech they don't like. By just calling it somehow lobbying on behalf of a foreign government. Because remember, even in Flynn's case, they didn't have direct payments from a foreign government, from the Turkish government. It was always, it was they were going more steps removed, more steps removed, more steps removed, more steps removed. The irony...
And again, it doesn't matter how many steps you want to run through if the effect is the same, right? Like, it's obvious where this money, it's obvious where this money came from. It's obviously why they were, why Lauren Chen took it. It's obvious why these people were promoting Russian talking points. It's all very, very obvious.
Of all of this is pretty much every think tank in Washington, D.C. is funded by the Mideast. For example, Ben Shapiro decided to be critical of Lauren Chen on these related issues, and they have different positions on.
Once more, there's also a difference between your allies going and putting money into your country, which they're also doing it, by the way, obviously. Like, they're not being unobvious about it. Like, they're not being, funneling money behind the doors, right? So there's a difference between your allies doing that and between your enemies doing that. So when your enemies do it, it's a very, very dangerous thing, right? It's when your allies do it, like, you can have institutes there promoting an allied country or the culture of an allied country, and that's not a problem. But when you have institutes, it's not a problem unless that ally, right, is sneaking behind your back and going and, backstabbing you and trying to go and do a lot of sneaky stuff around this behind the scenes, right? Like your Qatars and that sort of thing, right? Like the Qataris are extremely terrible for that and definitely deserve to be targeted for that. But the point being, though, that no, like these organizations that are simply promoting, again, like they're not threats, is what I should say, because they're like funded stuff that the U.S. does in like Europe, like Radio Free Europe and that. Like, again, like these aren't things that are threatening to the allied countries. They're not threatening to their existence because they're not seeking to go and undermine them. So there's a very big difference between an allied country doing some lobbying, right, or doing having like an organization that supports its country and you're operating in your country, right, that promotes its culture in your country, right. There's a difference between that happening and a difference between something that is intentionally trying to undermine and destabilize your country, right.
Israel, and I was watching the clip, I was like, what are the odds? Because Ben Shapiro is always, doing ads. Like there's these great parodies and satires of Shapiro that he has to do like 8 ads, every 15 seconds. But I was like, but what's the odds he does one that's funded by Israel? I was like, oh, well, what are the odds? He's going to sit here and criticize Lauren Chen for allegedly receiving money unknowingly.
Again, it's like that. So it's like he also disclosed. If he did an advertisement about Israel, he's also going to just literally disclose, like that's an Israeli ad. Like it's like, compare this to once more what Lauren Chen is doing, which is again taking money behind the scenes, right? Going and then covertly, I might add, promoting a bunch of propaganda points. Like nobody, like never says, "Oh, I received $10 million from Russia." I'm going to never disclosed any of this, right? Which is also by the issue, like you had at those universities, right, where it's like, oh, you guys never disclosed any of this massive amount of Qatari funding that you're doing, and now suddenly you have a bunch of professors and students that are mysteriously supporting Islamism. It's like, well, that's suspicious, isn't it? But it's like,
from a foreign government, and he's going to sit there and stop in the middle of it and do an ad on behalf of a foreign government. And yet, that's exactly what he does. He does right there. It's like he's a living parody.
No, he isn't. And also, once more, like, big difference between running something that's promoting your allies and something that's literally a foreign power trying to literally stabilize your country. Like, literally. But remember, of course, these guys, again, once more, like, look at that. It's like, running propaganda on behalf of Russia is fine, right? Like, they both believe that, I'm sure. Like, go back into these guys' history. Like, you're gonna find out what they believe about like Russia and Ukraine very quickly. I guarantee you, they're on the side of Russia. Like, just guarantee it, right? Guarantee it. And they'll probably be like the types that are like, oh, we should see sending massive amounts of funding to Israel and all that, blah blah blah, right? Like, just all that stuff. Alright, so we're here on Twitter, alright, and I just wanted to go and quickly check what these two guys are up to about Ukraine. Alright, so Viva Fry. Remember, everyone, it was Republicans at the direction of Donald Trump who were responsible for and standing in the way of fixing the border crisis by opposing a quote-unquote border bill that laundered $60 billion to Ukraine after Biden issued the unlawful executive order stopping blah 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 border wall, right? So there. So automatically laundering $60 billion to Ukraine. So there's an immediate accusation there. All right. Viva Fry, we're governed by the most despicable people on earth. All right. It's totally normal to see Justin Trudeau siphoning $1 billion of taxpayer funds to Ukraine while wearing that foreign country's flag as a scarf and standing before the foreign country's flag while berating Canadians. And if you think that's weird, you're the extremist. Right? So mocking people. Human trafficking in Ukraine has been a problem since the 90s. You didn't care about it until you could blame it on Putin. Why is that at Justin Trudeau? Right? My prediction is that in this attack on Israel, you will find weapons that were not only surrendered in Afghanistan, but also find weapons that were given to Ukraine involved in the slaughter. So there you go. Like immediately saying Ukraine is going to Hamas. Biolabs in Ukraine, Russian propaganda. Okay, there are biolabs in Ukraine, but they are not biological warfare labs. Okay, they are biological warfare labs, but they are not controlled by the U.S. Okay, the biological warfare labs are controlled by the U.S., but they're not. But they're for research. See. And then, the biggest problem with Justin Trudeau's Ukrainian Nazi soldier and Canadian Parliament gaffe is not that's an embarrassment to Canada. It is. The biggest problem is that this gaffe has highlighted at the international level the no Nazi problem of Ukraine. Okay. See what I'm talking about? Like, literally, just like, they're pro-Russian, right? This is from Robert Barnes now. Those who never bought the vaccine hype know to see through the Ukraine hype, right? Robert Barnes, a little FYI, in the last poll taken, Zelensky was so disliked in Ukraine, he makes Joe Biden look wildly popular. Personally, I think it is a complete coincidence the children of Biden, Pelosi, Kerry, and Romney all got lucrative gigs in Ukraine. Same people who promised you Roberts, Kavanaugh, and Barrett would be Scalia-style conservatives are the ones demanding more war over Ukraine. FYI, these three justices just stay, blah, blah, blah. What does Russia want from Ukraine? No nukes, no NATO, no Nazis. Is that so evil we must start World War III? Like, again, by the way, reminder, right after the invasion, right? Like, right after the invasion. Claims that the negotiator was assassinated. Two startling revelations this week about Ukraine war. One, Putin sought early peace deal that would enforce Minsk, return Donbass, release Crimea in exchange for purging Azov, ending Donbass war, and no NATO, which Ukraine agreed to until its negotiator got assassinated within. Reminder, by the way, this is not anything that happened. Like, this is complete fantasy fiction, right? Like, this did not happen. It did not happen, and he gets 1.2 million views, right? Again, it's like, this guy spreads lies. Be afraid spreads lies. Like, they're both liars, okay? Alright, so, I'll go, again, this is 2 minutes left. I'm not going to really pause too much more for this unless I have to.
But the big money doesn't come from Israel, folks. It comes from, ask yourself how Qatar could be hosting and safe harboring the leaders of Hamas and get zero criticism in the United States or Western media.
Well, why doesn't Russia get criticism either for supporting it? Like, by the way, they do get criticism in the media. It's just like the criticism has just been coming out because, again, like Qatar was a bunch of morons classified that stupid country as being the like a vital like a associated ally of NATO, right? When it's like literally an Iranian proxy state. So it's like just ridiculous stuff, right? Ridiculous stuff. And part of this again goes back to the whole thing that there are certain folks who come out of, especially in like the progressive movement, right? They come out of this whole mindset of the French Commune, where like the French Commune helped the Iranian revolutionaries once more, like the Iranian Ayatollah, get into power, and it's like helped them establish Islamism. And so you have all these guys who have like this fondness of Islamism because they view it as being like this revolutionary movement. It's like, so even when they get into more mainstream stuff, they still have this fondness that is there of Iran. And this is like the only thing I can think of that why there would be this sort of fondness for that country, right? And that's like, yeah, it's just stuff like that, right?
Well, maybe not in Paris and in France because they own the famous French soccer team, the PSG, Paris Saint-Germain. Maybe not in the United States because they own half the think tanks in Washington, D.C.
Again, there's no evidence that that particular one is true. like, like, it can, there, like, I definitely see these sorts of groups owning like the CARE, like something like that, the Canadian, like American Islamic, like those sorts of organizations, right? Like, I definitely see them owning those sorts of organizations just because what those organizations have been doing, they've been supporting. But it's like,
you couldn't, if you threw a rock.
Al Jazeera, right, has been getting a lot of criticism and has been banned in a lot of different countries now. It's starting to be banned in more ones, and that's their primary vector by which they put forward their propaganda in terms of the Qataris, right? But once more, this all doesn't absolve. This is all distraction, right? This guy, once more, he's been running propaganda for the sake of Russia, right? We just saw that in his Twitter thread, right? They was running propaganda for the sake of Russia. Both of these guys are. They're both promoting Russian talking points. Like, they're promoting this all. And we need to go and classify them as what they are. And it's importantly, we're not going to let them obfuscate this, right? Like, yes, Qatar is a problem. Russia also happens to be a problem, and a much bigger one than Qatar. So we're not going to let them obfuscate this. And this has all been shadow dressing just to go and dance around the issue and say that it, and basically go and argue that it's fine for conservatives to go and get money from foreign, Russians, like to go and promote Russian talking points, right? Because again, these guys almost certainly will have done something similar. Like, they might have higher degrees of separation once more, but they are getting hyper promoted on these platforms, for a reason. Like, even if it's just the case that they got promoted by like Pierre Thiel, and Pierre Thiel has been funneling them money, right? Like, I think he paid for Viva Fry and Barnes to come over to his platform, if I recall correctly, and then hyper promote them. So like, he's still like a guy who's hyper pro Russia, right? Like, he constantly promotes, again, Russian stuff on his site Rumble, despite the fact that Rumble, for the record, is banned in Russia. Like, just, but anyways, yeah, of course, they want to do business in Russia, is essentially, right? And so they're going to just, of course, promote these sorts of guys. They're going to give them talking points. And yeah.
You are going to hit somebody who's getting money from a foreign government. So the irony of them coming after this very tangential indirect claim
is not, again, it is not tangential. Indirect is literally propaganda, like propaganda that's being funded to the tune of $10 million.
Is just ludicrous. By this theory,
and that's the thing, right? Over and over again, he wants you to go and believe that, oh, it's ludicrous. Like, it's ludicrous that you should care that there's literally, business guys from foreign countries that are shoveling money into your country to go and promote propaganda that is literally degrading your country, that is against your country, that is, tell you go against your allies, to go and turn against your allies. Like, this is literally what he wants to go and promote. And he's like, oh, and if you go and question that, well, isn't that absurd? Like, why would you do that? Like, this is an absurd thing to go and question. Like, we should all just be able to go and do this sort of thing, right?
Everybody in D.C. belongs in prison.
Well, so it's not just that, Robert.
No, and that's once more not true. Not true.
Like, since that indictment comes down, I got jackasses on the internet saying, Viva, you're from Canada. You have no business commentating on American politics. It's like,
I mean, you have some business commenting, but you also should probably watch your tongue. Like, I doubt you have the ability to vote in the U.S., so that's already sketchy enough. And also, of course, you're promoting a bunch of propaganda, so I question what exactly you're doing. But frankly, I'm glad that your carcass isn't in Canada anymore, so there you go.
First of all, you morons, I pay taxes out here, so I think I have the right to speak.
By the way, he moved to the U.S., for the record, because had he been in Canada, right, like, there are more speech laws in Canada, right, and even though Canada's under the Canada's been very poor at, again, targeting these sorts of influencers in Canada, right, where it's like you're literally trying to run destabilization efforts. I was going to go and buy myself and say, oh, the conservatives would be better, but like, yeah, the guy like Via Frey wouldn't be targeted by the conservatives, right? Like, it's an unfortunate thing about the whole politicization thing, right? It's like, so yes, like the more damaging groups in Canada at the moment, like in terms of foreign influence, are typically more like on the left side. So yeah, the conservatives probably would clean a bit more house, but then again, like do the conservatives target, for example, like the PPC, like that Russian influence operation, like People's Party of Canada, for those wondering, like it's basically like the new right in Canada, right? Like that's sort of the new right. Like they spread a bunch of like hate against Indian people. Like they're just a despicable bunch of jackasses, right? But like, do the conservatives target them because it tangentially affects, you know, voters who lead right? I mean, maybe not. Lead again, it's like maybe we'll see. Yeah, it's unfortunately just the quandary they get into when you get too politicized, right? Where it's like you find yourself where it's like you're hesitant to go, you know, if you're right wing, you're hesitant to go and target the far right when it's like you really should be targeting them. If you're left wing, you find yourself hesitant to go target the far left. And if you're in the center, you kind of end up like being again hesitant to attack, you know, both of those different wings. Or it's like, you know, center left hesitant to go attack the far left, center right hesitant to go attack the far right, despite the fact that again they're destabilizing efforts that, you know, really need to be taken down a notch. Yeah. All right.
To some extent, but this is how it's like moving the Overton window to now everybody thinking a foreigner talking about American politics.
No, once more this is his persecution complex coming out, right? Like, no, many people around the world make a habit of talking about American politics. But anyways, oftentimes it's because the politics of their own country not as interesting or simply not as influential on the global level, right? But anyways,
even in America, is somehow election interference or FARA violations.
No, nobody has said that.
It's wild, and I don't know how you push back at that Overton window.
It's FARA should be eviscerated. FARA is walking.
What's more, like, again, just they're just gonna do their own little persecution dance. I think we've seen enough of this.
It's dreadful, awful, the worst place around. So much stinky, creaky, morally unprofound. This country's gone down the drain, and I'm ashamed to call it by name. Scream so much on Twitter, but still nothing seems to change. Getting really ticked off hearing something's gotta change. Things around here ain't perfect, and that's not right for me. Things around here ain't perfect, so let's burn the stage and street. Got a new game plan to shake things right up. You can play at dirty, don't need clean hands, surely. You're talking on the internet, engaging in free thought. People are talking shit, and my head bobs as I agree. Things around here ain't perfect, and that's not right for me. Things around here ain't perfect, so let's burn the stage and street. Got a new game plan to shake things right up. You can play it at dirty, don't need clean hands, surely. You're talking on the internet, engaging in free thought. People are talking shit, and my head bobs as I agree. Got a new game plan to shake things right up. You can play at dirty, don't need clean hands, surely. You're talking on the internet, engaging in free thought. People are talking shit, and my head bobs as I agree. So now I think why should I be poor? Can get a sweet payout for spitting truths, and with bots I won't be ignored. Regretting your choices yet? I laugh at so-called countrymen. I don't owe you scum any loyalty time, 'cause you're the enemy to me, and the man in Moscow agrees. I'll call you Satan, you like how that sounds. I'll call you globalist, you like how that sounds. I'll call you communist. Oh hey, my check from Beijing just clear, where was I? Oh yes. I'll call you banksters, you like how that sounds. I'll call you devils, you like how that sounds. I'll call you well whatever I'm told to. This is the truth movement, baby. We tell truths here, the ones we're paid to tell. We're all about the truth and about the money. Come call myself a hardcore Christian, so I'm gonna praise China's new system. Only critique is internal, yo, cause evil from only one source does flow. You're all Satan, we're God. Well, dear leader in Moscow, you're looking for a deal, got a complete package for you, and here it is if that's alright for you. I'd sell you my mother for a nickel, you can have my soul for a dime, sell out my country for $1, and humanity for a fiver. Oh yes I do, oh yes I do. Freedom's collapsing everywhere and I'm cheering it all. Oh yes I do, oh yes I do. I welcome our new overlords. Oh yes I do, oh yes I do. Freedom's collapsing everywhere.